Welcome back, and to the challenges facing the new cabinet or the caretaker government, as it will be taking the stage just for 3 months, preparing for the upcoming government, and whether or not it will be able to fulfill the aspiration of people, or at least set the stage for the new government to come, take the stage and build on what was built. We have with us for discussion Dr. Alaa Al-Shazly, Professor of Economics, Cairo University. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Dr. Khaled Nagaty, Chairman of the Egyptian Association for Supporting Small and Medium Project, SMEs. Thank you very much for being with us. And we start from the very beginning, the choice of reassigning Ibrahim Mahlab to take the position of the Premier for another time, or to set the stage for the upcoming cabinet. How do you view such a choice?
I think Prime Minister Ibrahim Mahlab has proved that he's more than qualified for this position for the time being. He hasn't had the chance, enough time to prove his expertise, but from what we have seen for the last few months, I think he's on the field. He wakes up early in the morning, goes working, and all the ministers are working very hard over the last few months. So I think he's a good choice for the upcoming period, especially when he's focusing on the street problems, and every day he's walking the streets, meeting people, and so on, as well as his ministers as well. So I think it's a good choice for the next period.
For the next period, you mean for the next 3 months?
Yes, for the next
3 months, and then we'll know.
I think it will be longer than this.
Let's wait and see.
Okay.
Let's wait and see. Your comment?
They are all nationalists. We just wish them all the best.
Definitely, but Ibrahim Mahlab as an economic figure, rather. I mean, Ibrahim Mahlab was the head of the Arab contractors. This is the Egyptian company that is known very much for implementing the very national projects, not just in Egypt, but rather in Africa and elsewhere. His choice for another term, how do you view it?
It signals some sort of stability in this transitory stage between the pre-election period, the pre-presidential period, and the post-parliamentary election period. So you need some sort of stability.
Doesn't it give a kind of indication that it will be a platform to set the stage for the coming government? I mean here, within the framework of the economic portfolio?
Not necessary, because there will be a new parliament with newly elected, cabinet. They might have the same views, they might have different views. It's kind of debate what exactly will be the kind of policies or strategies for the next 4 years. But for this period, talking at present time, you need some sort of stability in the pre-presidential election period up till the parliamentary election period. A continuation, so that you don't have the stop-and-go policies which might be harmful at this time.
Right. Of course, one important file, or different files in front of this government, is to convert the program of President Sisi into reality, or at least put the base. How do you view the challenges that can be facing this government, especially that it is a caretaker one?
I think President Sisi has said it very clear, loud and clear during his the day that he went to office, and he made it very clear, although that he didn't announce what's so-called program, presidential election program. However, he said it very loud and clear that day that he went to office. There are two main aspects he's focusing on. One of them is investment, which is very important to secure investors, either Egyptian or international investors. They have to feel safe in Egypt to pump more funds in Egyptian market. The second aspect is the small and medium enterprises, which he focused on, based on starting a new ministry for, especially for this purpose.
Actually, it became part of the Ministry of Industry and Trade.
Oh, that's lately. I haven't heard that news yet.
Yes,
Okay.
right.
Well, it makes sense. Still makes sense.
Yes, but
Still
it
makes
is,
sense.
of course, important, since he said that there are two important or pivotal roads that he will be taking: mega projects and small and medium enterprises. Yes. How do you view such an important, the importance of going in parallel with these two areas?
It makes sense, of course, for job creation and solving the unemployment problem. You need small-scale enterprises and put more investment into these kind of activities. At the same time, you need the mega projects or large-scale projects, investment projects, because these are going to help the country to leap forward in capital accumulation process for the different kind of activities that we heard about in energy, agriculture and land reclamation, in industrial zones, and yes, these are the main type of activities that we heard of, and of course urban development. All this needs large-scale investments and putting the investment path for the country as a whole.
Well, you said there will be mega projects, particularly the Suez Canal access, and of course the mega project within the field of petroleum.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
This comes under energy in general, oil and gas, electricity, all the whether traditional or non-conventional power generation from wind, from you see, all these are needed. We need all these kind of projects. At the same time, you need job creation for mostly a young population that suffer from high rates of unemployment. So you have to absorb them in an economic way. One way to do this is for small-scale enterprises, okay? Because the capital of these small-scale enterprises, of course, by definition, is not as large as the mega projects. So you can create economic entities that make use of this young generation who are looking for job opportunities. And they also add to the economy in different fields. And these small-scale enterprises will have the opportunity to grow into medium and larger investment projects later on. So it's sensible to put emphasis on this type of investments. At the same time, you need the large-scale investment because by definition, again, if you have power generation plants, then this is large-scale investments, and we need them for industry, for even for electricity generation, for
renewable resources and all this stuff.
We need all this. You need land reclamation agricultural projects.
Definitely.
And these are large-scale investments, okay? You also, and it will also absorb employment for sure. But I think small and medium enterprises will take the larger share in job creation.
Right. The formation of the new cabinet, and when Prime Minister Ibrahim Mahlab spoke about the formation of this cabinet, he said that it will be an executive one, not a political one. Exactly what did he mean by that?
I think you should let go of the idea of, or the fear of having ministers, having businessmen, successful businessmen, to become ministers. They don't, in my opinion, my own humble opinion, ministers, they shouldn't come from only from academic background. They should come from the field, from the market itself. So why not taking successful businessmen as a role model and become ministers? That's nothing's wrong with this. What I think he meant by not being a political cabinet, I think he's not going to ask the political parties to submit new names for them to be acknowledged as ministers as well, just to have a fair value or fair participation of all political parties in the cabinet, which is good for the time being. I think it was a very good idea not to ask the political parties to submit their names or what recommendations they might have, but to be the only decision of the Prime Minister to choose the ministers or the candidates they would work with him.
From your point of view, doesn't this significance to that the cabinet will be just assigned just to fulfill the aspiration of people, protect the Egyptian economy, or at least find ways out of for troubles in economy, and the presidential authority will be taking care of the political aspects?
I think if you look at European countries, I know very well from being there. I lived in the US for 15 years. I know how it works. It doesn't have to come again out of political aspect, but there's the parliament and the president of the country. They should be entitled to the political aspects of the process. However, the executive, they should be appointed only by the Prime Minister to work hand in hand with him. There's no way I can ask the Prime Minister to accommodate some political parties' recommendations just to have some ministers from the majority of the political parties. It doesn't make any sense, especially for the time being. We made this mistake before, and we don't want to do it again. So why not keeping the political topic to the president, and he's entitled to this right, as well as the parliament as well. But for the executives as ministers, it should be they should be reporting only to the Prime Minister, and he's the only one entitled to choose them.
Right. We're now moving to another axis, which is the reviving the economy. And President, of course, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has outlined the ambitious strategy for the upcoming stage for Egypt. And before we just start with our economic file and the challenges facing this portfolio or our dire economy at this stage, let's first have a quick report and then come back for discussion.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi faces a momentous challenge in the form of Egypt's ailing economy. There are a few key areas where Sisi is facing pressure to push through reforms that could boost state coffers and foreign currency reserves. The first challenge is the energy subsidies, where the government provides consumers with a hefty subsidy on electricity and gas. The country's finance minister warned in March that state spending on energy subsidies would reach 10 to 12% above budget unless reforms were made to the system immediately. The second major challenge is tourism, as the tourism sector has been hit badly by the political unrest that has plagued Egypt since Hosni Mubarak was ousted in 2011. In 2010, the year before the uprising in Cairo's Tahrir Square, 14 million tourists had visited the country, while tourism accounted for 14% of Egypt's gross domestic product (GDP). The number of tourists visiting the country in March was down from more than 1 million in 2013 to 755,000, 32.4% lower. Nevertheless, last week witnessed several important economic reports which would add to the economy. The government has imposed a temporary additional yearly tax of 5% for 3 years, starting from the current tax period. The additional tax covers those whose net income exceeds 1 million Egyptian pounds for the income of natural persons or the profit of legal persons, such as companies, organizations, and institutions. After the new tax is implemented, rates paid by companies on profits between the 1 million Egyptian pounds and the 10 million Egyptian pounds will rise from 20% to 25%. Company profits of over 10 million Egyptian pounds will be taxed at 30% rather than 25%. In another development, the Suez Canal saw a 7% increase in revenues last May, as compared to the same month a year before. According to the canal's official website, revenues last month recorded some $468.8 million. The Suez Canal's revenues in the first 11 months of the current fiscal year, which ends in June, recorded $4.8 billion, representing a 5% rise in the same period of the last fiscal year, 2012-2013. In the meantime, the Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics, CAPMAS, said that the annual urban inflation was 8.3% in May. However, monthly urban inflation declined in May to record 0.7% compared to 0.2% in April. May's inflation rise is the smallest increase since November 2013, when Egypt's urban inflation hit a three-year high of 13%. Last week, the gap between the Egyptian pound's official and unofficial exchange rates narrowed, with the currency strengthening against the dollar in the black market and remaining stable at a central bank dollar sale. The central bank said that it had sold $39.2 million at a cutoff price of 7.1402 Egyptian pounds on Thursday, unchanged from its previous sales on Wednesday and Monday. It had offered $40 million. The dollar was offered for 7.37 Egyptian pounds in the black market on Thursday, stronger than Wednesday's rate of 7.40, the black market trader said. In another positive sign, global financial institution Morgan Stanley announced its decision to keep the Egyptian Stock Exchange in the MSCI Emerging Markets Index due to positive market developments. It also said that there has been a significant increase in foreign exchange reserves, which reflects stability in exchange rate policies. On another front, remittances from Egyptian expats in 2014 are up 22.2% so far as compared to $18 billion last year.
Welcome back, and back to you, Dr. Alaa. And we were speaking about the challenges facing the Egyptian economy, and there are some indications or indicators that the Egyptian economy is recovering. Your comment?
It's not actually strong signals of coming back
of course, definitely not yet.
2011 indicators. Just that we heard that there is an increase in remittances, expected to be 22 billion for this fiscal year, compared to 18 billion last year. So an increase of about 4 billion, which is good news for the economy. There is regaining of stability in the foreign exchange market. That's a good sign as well. There is an improvement in the security scene in the country. So the country is more able now than 3 years ago for receiving new investments, foreign or domestic investors, by either. This, in my opinion, are the main good news that we heard of in a few months or few weeks ago. And the challenges remain.
Before we take the challenges, but let me hear, you spoke about something very important, which is the return back of the stock markets. Yeah. Or at least that the stock market has been seeing a kind of some gains during the past week. To which reason do you attribute that?
Well, there were mixed signals about what happened in the stock market. Right before the presidential election, we have witnessed an increase in the trade volume. Again, the indicators of the stock market were going up, which is good. At the same time, we heard that there will be taxes levied on securities investments, and that caused the decline again for some time. And then it is fluctuating, as we would expect in any stock market, up and down, back to normal. The stock market is very sensitive to the political scene. So again, as there were expectations or anticipation of regaining of security after the presidential election, with the announced large-scale investment projects, together with what you mentioned, and increasing attention to small-scale enterprises and for job creation and so on. all this were sending good signals about the investment environment in Egypt. Also, a relook at the legislation for encouraging investment. All this were sending positive signals to market participants about the future of the economy, the prospects of the economy, okay, for growth prospects of the economy. So they responded positively to that in anticipation of what's coming next, okay, as any investor would do. He's buying the future, is sacrificing today for a better tomorrow. So at the middle of this, the government said there will be taxes on securities investment.
Yes, it was
so
just ahead of the presidential election, so it was a surprise for many, yes.
So they paused and had a relook about the whole situation, whether they are gaining, losing from their increasing market trading activities and so on. And then after that, it stabilized more or less, fluctuating around normal levels, as we would expect in any stock market. So, but in general, if you look to the picture as a whole, it is more optimistic than it was in the last 3 years.
Definitely. We'll get to the obstacles, but let me here first take Dr. Nagaty's opinion about the separation of some ministries, the merging of others, and all this. We know that the Ministry of Trade and Industry was separated from the Ministry of Investment, and it merged with the small and medium enterprises, or this particular sector was or joined the ministry here. We know that there is a new Minister for Finance. We know that there is a new Minister for Investment. How do you view such an environment and the merging and the separation of these ministries? How do you view this?
Just before I would answer, I would just like to highlight just one more thing to the previous question to my colleague here regarding the Egyptian exchange. The decision and report of Morgan Stanley that was issued a few days ago to keep the Egyptian stock market at the emerging market index has a very good and positive impact.
Indicator on that Egypt is on the right track. Very much indeed. Very much indeed.
Back to your question here about separating the two ministers. I've said that 6 months ago. When His Excellency, the Minister Abdul Noor, has been appointed for both ministries, it will be too much of a load and pressure on one person to carry out all these responsibilities for 2 or 3 different ministries. History will only remember the result. History doesn't remember the efforts. No matter how much efforts he would have put in 2 or 3 ministries at the same time, there's no way one person can handle all this. He's very good and optimistic about the future, and I like that myself. But I believe that separating both investment and trade from each other, that was a good decision. That would help the Egyptian market, that would help the Egyptian government as well, and the Egyptian people. I think His Excellency Mr. Ashraf Salman, now he's been appointed as the Minister of Investment.
Yes.
He's been this gentleman. He's been most of his life in the investment banking and so on. So I think it was a very wise decision for him to be appointed as Minister of Investment. The separation of both ministries, especially merging the small and medium enterprises with the Ministry of Trade, that was a very good decision as well. Because I think it should have been either ministry. Maybe it wasn't the right time yet. Maybe the market was not ready for this yet. But to have a ministry like the trade focusing or containing this very important sector, that was needed long time ago.
Dr. Hani Adri for Finance?
Yes. Dr. Hani Adri, there's no question marks about him. He's been proven. He's one of the experts in this market for a long time. Especially, I think, he was the minister just a few months ago. He's not a new minister. I think it was a right decision to keep him for stability issue. And
he's near. He's near.
Dr. Hani Adri.
Dr. Hani Adri, yes. I guess no. No, rather he stayed.
Yes, he stayed, yes.
Yes.
So I think it was a wise decision for stability, as I said.
Despite the fact that he issued the new taxes right ahead of the presidential elections.
Everyone makes mistakes.
Right. To the challenges facing the Egyptian economy. And we all know how the Egyptian economy is suffering from 3 years of turmoil and all the surrounding circumstances. Your comment?
The challenges remain, of course, investment, growth, and job creation. These are the three major challenges, and they are interrelated. Once you open up the key for any one of them, you will find it up and running. It will be okay. In the presidential campaign before the elections, both competitors agreed on the same things in general, that there will be what we mentioned at the beginning of this program, large-scale and small-scale investments, more or less balanced approach to the problem of job creation and for investment and growth. Now that the elected president has announced clearly that part of his program will be for agricultural development and including land reclamation, exploring new areas in the country that needs more infrastructure, for example, to expand in these new areas. During the construction period of these agricultural projects, we will be able to attract a lot of manpower into it, and it will help solve the job creation problem to a large extent. And this is very important. Hand in hand with the small-scale enterprises. You see, one is coming from agriculture and land reclamation, and one is coming from small scale in solving the problem. So you see, it's a balanced approach. One mainly will be in industry, maybe the small scale is more related to industry, and that explains why the new portfolio for investment, industry, and small-scale enterprises. The other thing is even for the industrial zones, for the energy projects, for transport projects.
There is even a new ministry for rural areas.
Yes. Rural areas development, yes.
Exactly.
This is extremely important.
Yes.
It will help a lot in resolving
This is the first time in Egypt history that a ministry is as such.
Yeah, and we need it.
But the ministry is not new.
But the ministry is
yes,
new.
the ministry is, yes.
Exactly. For the other projects that I was mentioning, the non-agricultural sectors, also during the construction stage, you will be needing a lot of manpower, and that will help at the early phases of its construction of these projects. But once these projects are established, mostly they will need a high technology and capital-intensive techniques. And for that, by that time, I expect that the job creation problem would have been, at least large part of it, have been resolved. These trained manpower can be used in the small-scale enterprises, in other activities. They can be given opportunities through something like the social fund programs and so on, and the social safety nets programs can help a lot in solving also the unemployment problem. If you have an extended social safety nets, okay, an extended social safety net that can cater to the need of the country in different activities and for creating jobs and investment, new investments at the small scale level. I think all this will help solve the job creation problem. For growth, for growth you need investment, and this is coming with the improved security seen in the country, with the investment map that the country is going to prepare for foreign and domestic investors. with all these in the picture, you can only hope that it will be orchestrated by the newly appointed governments, whether now or after the parliamentary election, for to be implemented at a good pace, and that would put Egypt on a good growth path.
I'm sorry, I just would like to add one thing here, just one quick issue here. I don't want the government to look at the Egyptian manpower, Egyptian youth and fresh grads as manpower, because fresh grads, they spend 4 or 5 years in colleges, in education, higher education level. It seems very hard to me to convince a fresh grad to go and work in rural area as a worker or whatever it is in rural areas or developments and so on. So we need to divide between lower and medium level manpower and higher education level manpower. The higher level, we shouldn't look at it as a manpower, but we should educate them to become entrepreneurs. We have 700,000 fresh grads every year. We can treat all of them as manpower, because we still need entrepreneurs, we still need SMEs, because each one of them, if they open a new small and medium enterprise, they could have 4 to 6
But
employees.
not all of them can afford even to open a
That's
small
why we have the social funds. That's where the social funds, the SFD comes handy to help the fresh grads, and they have tremendous programs to help fresh grads for this aspect.
My question was about the ahead of the presidential election, and when Prime Minister Ibrahim Mahlab took office or assumed his post as Prime Minister, he said that he would combat monopoly. And he said that the government would be abiding by the principles of free economy, which would be giving investors or he will be granting all the privileges to facilitate their work. This was the first, or when
He stepped in.
Prime Minister Ibrahim Mahlab took office.
Yes.
Now, and under President Sisi, who has told the private sector and the Arab, of course, and foreign investors to come and join the business or the economic field here in Egypt. Do you think that we will keep on this kind of free economy, or there's going to be a kind of restriction to some extent to see which would suit the Egyptian economy and which would not?
Okay. I think here the Arab aid and Gulf aid wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for President Sisi. So if he hadn't been elected, I don't think he would have had all this help from the Arab brothers and so on. But time has become now to secure investors. Enough with the aid. So we need investment now. To have investment in Egypt, we have to secure the investors, either Egyptian or international investors. I can imagine an investor putting billions in Egypt just for the next day to wake up in the morning that he has been shut down and he's been put on trial. Well, and his capital has been taken away from him. And the contract he has signed with the Ministry of Investment has just been shredded out like it never happened. That cannot happen anymore. It had happened in the past, and that caused us a lot of problems.
But monopoly?
I think the Egyptian President, Mr. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, would know very well how to manipulate the internet. I don't know if manipulate is the right word, but how to attract the international market to invest in Egypt. Egypt is a very good place now to invest in, and I believe we'll have a lot of investors, not only from the Arab countries, however, from the international markets as well.
So there will there will be no monopoly or somebody monopolizing a certain area?
No, I don't think so.
Hopefully. Saudi Arabia has already called for a conference for donors,
Yes.
For donor countries to support Egypt's economy. How important is such a conference would be, and do we really need a conference for international donors, or do we need investors to come and invest in Egypt?
It's a more disciplined way. This conference, the so-called conference for donors, it's more disciplined.
Because I don't think that Egypt is Somalia, for an instant, and we are not in that very dire situation to.
I think donors is not the right word. It's not the right word.
It is just that you need to present the international investors community with an investment map, kind of investment. Here are our investment opportunities that you can come and join us in. And if you commit capital, these are the expected rates of return that can come out of it. And so if it is a win-win situation for the government and for investors, international investors, then everyone is winning, and that's it. So I see it in a positive way as a disciplined strategy to collect funds from different parts of the world in a shorter period of time, a more orchestrated strategy for a good start. So
because our businessmen are not able to fund different investments at the time being, so now we are looking for international donors?
Yes, they can complement. And of course, a good part of the investment projects that Egypt is looking for in the coming phase will be partly carried out by the domestic investors and partly by foreign investors. Of course, the problem is that all over the world you might face a capital shortage. You have large investment plans, but the capital that is available might be not that large. So you look for other parts of the world to come and help you with the saving investment gap. You know, you mobilize savings domestically, but there is a gap for your investment plan to implement it. So it has come from foreign sources. Right. And if this donors conference or whatever it is called is going to be a disciplined way or more organized way in which Egypt can present its investment opportunities and the donors are willing to commit capital to this investment project in a shorter period of time without wasting too much time in the start of this expected investment boom in Egypt, then it's a welcome step, of course.
Yes.
But
everything
I'm sorry, Egyptian investors, they need just security and they will invest in Egypt because they invest out of Egypt much more than what needed in Egypt.
Exactly. This is what I was speaking about. Unfortunately, my time is up and I have to end it here. Dr. Alaa Al-Shazly, Professor of Economics, Cairo University, and Dr. Khaled Nagaty, Chairman of the Egyptian Association for Supporting Small and Medium Enterprises. We thank you very much, both gentlemen, for being with us.
Thank you.
Of course, Egypt will be seeing ups, maybe sometimes downs, but surely we are going on the right track. Many thanks for watching. Tomorrow would be another contentious debate with another colleague. Until tomorrow, good night.